There's virtually no documentation of this movie's existence. If you go to the Rotten Tomatoes, no reviews when it came out. All of them are user reviews, and I can tell you when I looked, there's one user review on Mr. Saint Nick, and it kind of sums up what I feel like the general sentiment around this movie is. The review was written by Sarah P. And she said, "I enjoyed watching it once, but that was probably enough for me. 2 out of 5." I mean, that's Christmas movies in a nutshell.
Hey baby, I hear those blues a calling. It's time for the Frazier on Frazier podcast. Merry Christmas!
Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Solstice, Kwanzaa.
All the holidays. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
We're back. We're doing a Christmas episode, and we wanted to do something before we start putting out episodes. The new season, season of Frazier on Frazier. We're gonna do season 2.
We wanted to kick it off right. We wanted to kick it off with something. We wanted to celebrate Jimmy Buffett's birthday with something real special. So we decided to open things. At this point we've recorded a couple season 2 episodes, but we're kicking it off with a special little Christmas thing. Adam, go ahead.
Well, and we decided to film it on Christmas, record it on Christmas Eve because it'd be more authentic. But now the problem is we have to record and edit and publish this within the next 24 hours or so. So we shouldn't. What I'm saying is we shouldn't have rushed into this.
Well, that's a commitment now.
So we're already that train has left the station. So we're not reviewing a episode of Frasier that's Christmas themed. We decided we would sort of take a break from Frasier. So if you're a strict Frasier fan, feel free to skip this episode. But I think this will be of interest to people who are fans of Frasier, and maybe more specifically Kelsey Grammer, because we're going to be talking about the made-for-TV 2002 film Mr. Saint Nick, starring Kelsey Grammer,
broadcast on The Wonderful World of Disney ABC anthology.
And it's technically a Disney film, although it's not on Disney Plus, which I think says something about the quality of this film.
Oh yeah,
that Disney Plus didn't even want to touch it.
Didn't pick it up.
And we'll have the Apple Dumpling Gang, we'll have Mr. Bogey, we'll have all these terrible, horrible movies on our platform. But Mr. Saint Nick, you gotta go.
Absolutely, can't have you here. It was made by Hallmark Entertainment, which at first I was like, is this like a Hallmark Channel movie?
Yeah, so do they own is that the real reason? Is do they own the rights to this?
See, but when I click on the Hallmark Entertainment link on Wikipedia, I'm redirected to Sonar Entertainment. So I don't actually know if Hallmark Entertainment and Sonar Entertainment are... I'm sorry.
But Hallmark did help. They were involved in the production of this movie, which explains a lot, because Hallmark is known for their high quality made for television films.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially the Christmas-themed ones. And again, I feel like this is an appropriate topic for a Frasier podcast because, I mean, not only is it Kelsey Grammer in starring in the role, he's playing Frasier.
He's essentially...
The names are changed and, locations are different, but it's still, there are an ungodly number of parallels between this movie and Frasier, both about men eligible bachelors played by Kelsey Grammer, semi-famous philanthropists. They have to deal with daddy issues. There's a romance between a housekeeper and someone the higher class, which we'll get into that. We'll get into all the weird sexism, racism in this movie. This movie reminds me of actually talking with your relatives on during the holidays, because much like that, talking to your relatives, it's all well and good until someone starts talking about illegal immigration.
That is about 1/3 of the film is immigration stuff, which is
right.
fascinating in a movie starring Kelsey Grammer.
Right, and that's the other thing, because you have to also think about the time when this movie came out. It's 2002, and it's Disney. So obviously, this is kind of aping off the success of the Santa Claus, starring Tim Allen, that whole franchise. And that was actually a movie that I watched a bunch when I was a kid. Like growing up, that was like the holiday movie I watched. Going from that, like halfway through watching this movie, I had to stop and watch the Santa Claus, which I haven't seen in years, but I had to watch it because I had to I felt like I needed to compare the two and want to be able to compare the two for this review. And yeah, they're both of our stories, they're about men becoming Santa Claus, sort of figuring that whole thing out. They're both
the odd requirements and different rules and regulations around how you become Santa Claus both come up significantly in this film. It is so odd that the original Santa Claus was not about the Mrs. Claus at all until Santa Claus 2, the Mrs. Claus. This kind of incorporates both inheriting the throne and getting married in the same swoop.
In both this movie and the Santa Claus, star actors who almost certainly voted for Trump both times.
Oh, no, absolutely.
So it's just weird that we got the same kind of movie twice.
It is a bizarre thing.
But I mean, I guess we should kind of talk about like what the actual movie is. Our Frasier reviews, we don't have like a script to go off of. No one's bothered to make a transcript of Mr. St. Nick.
Shout out to KACL780.net, who has helped us out throughout this whole thing with having a database of all the Frasier episodes. Unfortunately, they have not cataloged Mr. St. Nick on their website, so we don't have that to fall back on. This is largely going to be off of memory.
Well, did we actually check? Maybe they have, and we just didn't bother to check.
I've trolled every page. They have Frasier scripts in Japanese, but they do not have they don't have Mr. St. Nick.
They're like, we're not watching that movie.
Absolutely not.
So yeah, we're gonna kind of try and go in order and explain it as best we can. Wes, I have a feeling you probably are gonna have a better grasp on like the sequence of events that transpired in the movie.
There's a slim chance. Here's what I'm going to do. I don't know. Do we want to go through it chronologically, or do we want to just
I mean, we could jump around a little bit, but I guess we might as well start at the beginning of the movie.
First of all, in probably the most artsy part of the film, we just see a reindeer walking.
A lone reindeer walking.
A lone reindeer, and then we crossfade over to Wallace Shawn, who's reading a book.
Wallace Shawn. The movie starts and it's like Wallace Shawn, bam, right in your face.
Did you think you weren't gonna get Wallace Shawn? Guess what? Wallace Shawn. He's dressed like a wizard, and it's
he's dressed like as an old. You said he looked like Merlin. And I kind of assumed he was, for some reason.
No, he is...
Despite Merlin not being part of the Santa mythos, but that doesn't mean anything in this movie.
A super fascinating choice, and I'm so glad you brought that up, Adam. He is actually playing Mimir. If you look at the IMDb, he's playing Mimir.
Right.
Who is Mimir? Mimir, you might ask, if you aren't familiar with Norse mythology, or more likely, if you haven't played the most recent iteration in the God of War franchise, Mimir is the Norse god of wisdom, famous for having his head lopped off. And then when he was a disembodied head, he would give Odin advice secretly. And he comes up in the game because Kratos, he just carries his head around. And he's sort of like he provides exposition. Anyway, that's who Wallace Shawn is playing.
Why wouldn't they just have him be a disembodied head, though? If you're telling me this is based on an actual like person from mythology, why wouldn't they bother to get the mythology right?
Let me respond to that, Adam, with another. First of all, the budget on this film not high. You
can do a crappy like floating head effect real easy, and it wouldn't be out of place.
That costs an amount of money. Look, the best way I can exemplify how much money they were willing to put into Wallace Shawn being a wizard, and I put this in a section I call things I liked that aren't jokes. I put this in that section. One of my favorite bits, I'm gonna do a quick summary and then we'll come back and describe what happens. In the first scene, they do this whole rehearsal. Oh man, here's Santa Claus, here's Mrs. Claus, and now we need his heir. The Claus apparent. Oh shoot, he isn't here. Wallace Shawn gets grumpy and he's like, I'm a busy wizard. I'm not gonna stick around. Like, I'll be here for the actual ceremony. And normally, in a more whimsical movie like a Halloween Town, in a higher budget film like a Halloween Town or a Halloween Town High, they would then have like a poof and some smoke. Instead, he just turns left and walks away in his wizard costume, and it's one of my favorite moments in the film.
He
and
doesn't...
I don't think, like, it's one of those things where you don't need to follow him, but the camera follows him for 4 full seconds as he, like, very gingerly comes down steps and walks toward stage left with all of this magic at his disposal. He's like, I'll just walk. You know, I gotta save the magic.
It's a bizarre choice, and like you said, the scene plays out. The opening of this movie, we're at like a rehearsal for the passing of the torch, the literal passing of the torch. There's the old Santa Claus, who is played by Doc Hopper from the Muppet movie,
or Pappy O'Daniel from Oh Brother Where Art Thou. It's Charles Durning.
Charles Durning. Who I look at Charles Durning and I'm reminded of John Wayne Gacy. So he's not the ideal person to be playing Santa Claus.
No, I mean, here's the tough thing about him being Santa, and he's a crotchety man character, very similar to Ed Asner in Elf. He's just a little grumpy, but he also, it's the perfect Santa when you want someone who is a strict, ardent believer in Christmas traditions, which is good for this film because Charles Durning saying.
But he's just kind of a dick.
He is crotchety, and he also has a slight, like, it might just be because I know him from Oh Brother Where Art Thou, but he has like a slight southern drawl to me, which is a little bizarre. By the way, I
just thought he was drunk the entire time.
I just want to say, both Adam and I, this shows what artless people Adam and I are, because I'm looking at his Wikipedia. He was in Oscar-winning films like The Sting and Dog Day Afternoon.
Right,
but
yeah.
We know him from The Muppet Movie and Oh Brother Where Art
I
Thou.
watched that movie a lot as a kid, and I remember him as the bad guy. It's like the one thing that sticks out. Like I'll be watching Tootsie, and I'll be like, oh, it's Doc Hopper.
No, I can't argue with that. That does make sense. Retracted.
The thing that I found weird about this right off the bat was they treat Santa like he's royalty in this. Like
it's a position that you inherit, passed on, much like British royal, much like a monarchy. It's passed from father to child.
But they call him. They actually call him like Your Majesty and like King Nicholas, and it's a very weird thing to think of Santa Claus as a king, because it's like if that's the case, are the elves like the subjects?
I guess
his subjects are they're the one he has all his subjects making the toys and living with him at the North Pole. It's very strange.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Adam, because the terminology is a royalty thing, but it is also referred to constantly as a family business,
right?
Which
is muddling the metaphor,
right? It's really puzzling. And there's also, when you really get down to it, and here's the tough thing that the movie tries to play with in a playful way, but it raises larger questions. When you think about Santa Claus as a business, and you think about the North Pole as a business, the entire idea sort of falls apart, because there's no, if you're talking about supply chains and trade routes necessary to produce a worldwide toy factory, the North Pole is as far away from every single child's household as it could possibly be. Kelsey Grammer points out that he wants something in a warmer climate so he doesn't freeze his ornaments off. But when you say ornaments, you mean his testicles.
Right.
He doesn't want his balls frozen.
This movie raises questions that no one is asking.
No one has ever asked, why does Santa do the things he do when he brings toys to children?
Well, no, because
raises those questions.
Again, I have to compare it to the Santa Claus, which they do a fair amount of oh, well, how does Santa Claus get down the chimney if the house doesn't have a chimney? How does he, go around the entire planet and deliver all the toys in one night? They spend some amount of time on that. They don't really delve into those. They're just it's magic. That you don't need an explanation because it's Santa Claus. But this movie, it's Santa Claus can read kids' minds. That's how he knows what kids want for Christmas.
I will say, if you watch the original Santa Claus, as we both have, there's a whole bit where the kid, in the first act of the film, the kid is asking all these questions, because Tim Allen is the ardent believer, and his the other parent, the mother, and the stepfather, who is a psychiatrist, are he needs a realistic view. he needs to be based in reality. And Tim Allen is like, you're raising a kid not to believe in Santa Claus? That's dumb. And so the kid has all these questions presented by Neil. I remember the stepfather's name is Neil.
Right.
And
It was
brought up
Judd. It was Judge.
Was it
Nelson?
Judge? No, you're not Judge Nelson.
Judd Nelson.
It wasn't Judd Nelson. Stop it. He was from Beverly Hills Cop. Judge Reinhold. It was Judge Reinhold.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, Judge Reinhold.
But there was a whole scene in the Santa Claus where he's like, "Well, how does he come down the chimney if the house doesn't have a chimney?" And Tim Allen's like, "I don't know. Stop asking me this question. Just believe." And then we see Tim Allen go to a house that doesn't have a chimney as Santa Claus, and he's like, "I don't know how this works." And then a chimney just appears magically in this home. So there were questions being... It was a thing that came up in the Santa Claus, but also there were the thing I had an issue with in this movie was that there were bits that were confusing. Like, so in the original Santa Claus, starring Tim Allen, Santa starts to put on weight. And, like, he starts to get a beard. He starts to naturally become Santa Claus. Like, Kelsey Grammer...
It was like he was bitten by a were-Santa. Like,
bitten by a radioactive Santa Claus.
Like, that's one of the things that also makes the Santa Claus horrifying, is because it's like body horror, where his, like, he can't control what he's changing into.
The fact that there are two movies where someone becomes Santa Claus against their will is terrifying. It is a weird thing. The thing that this movie does instead is bits like, if you put on a Santa costume and you're going to become Santa Claus, the clothes start attacking and constricting themselves.
Right. You have to wear Santa clothes at all times.
But in the old Santa Claus, if he tries to put on a Santa suit, they'll fly off. Because, if any normal person puts on a Santa costume, it just flies off.
Right. These are not powers that Santa needs. These are ridiculous. The Northern Lights, that's not like something to do with like science and Earth's magnetic field. It's just because of Santa's. It just follows Santa around.
The Aurora Borealis just follows Santa Claus wherever he is. So because he's in Miami, the Aurora Borealis just appears in Miami. And I love that the meteorologist was just like, "Hey, there's a constellation out. That's in Miami." It feels like that should be the equivalent of like the Majora's Mask moonfall for someone who knows meteorology. It should be like, this is the most terrifying thing I've ever seen.
So we get the scene where there's the rehearsal dinner for the passing of the new Santa Claus.
Good God, we're still 2 minutes deep. We're gonna go to 1.25 speed. So Frasier is holding a party.
So they're like, "Where is he?" And like cut to Kelsey Grammer leading a conga line in Miami Beach.
As you do when you look like Kelsey Grammer, you're naturally hosting a party where you're the front of the conga line. That's unfair. Anybody can be the head of a conga line.
It feels like a commercial almost.
And here's the thing. We brought this up just before. I want to say real quick, the director of this movie is Craig Zisk. You might know him from directing a bunch of episodes of your favorite TV shows, but not the episodes you remember. The Office, Parks and Rec, Shameless, Nip Tuck, The Exorcist, the TV show The Exorcist, a bunch of episodes of Weeds, United States of Terror, The Larry Sanders Show. He is a prolific director. He's worked on a bunch of TV shows, a small number of movies that got into theaters.
He's Jewish.
He is a Jewish man. His family is Jewish, according to his Wikipedia page.
Who better to direct this Christmas movie?
And now that you say it like that, I'm like, oh yeah, that is funny. All right, yeah. He is a Jewish man. One thing that you will notice about a number of his movies, including his release into theaters, which is called, I believe, The English Teacher. I want to get that right before we move on.
Are you saying this isn't his opus?
Well, I mean, it could be. But if you look at his IMDb, you'll notice a lot of TV series, you'll notice a lot of TV movies, and a couple of movies that are almost exactly 90 minutes long. What am I getting at? I believe Craig Zisk works to a very specific formula. He makes something that is a certain amount of time, probably most likely to adhere to when commercials should pop up, much like a TV show needs exclamation point or a climax every 7 minutes.
Right.
You'll notice that there are bits in this movie, including when I watched it on Tubi, which has scattered commercials, there's a bit where like it fades to black and then comes back, and you're like, oh, that's where a commercial break goes. There are those in the film because he makes movies intending for there to be commercials. The thing I'm drawing at is that this is a career director, nothing wrong with that. I feel like he knows exactly what he has to do in order to make a movie on time, make it on budget, get the scenes he needs, get the coverage he needs, put it up, whatever. It's done. Move on to the next thing. I've filmed 95 movies and TV shows. I have a lot of work to do.
He's a director for hire. In Hollywood, they can't all be like huge, big blockbusters. You have to have people to direct like the smaller stuff, like commercials and TV shows and stuff like that. He's not like there to like make a statement or do anything real artsy. He's just there to sort of get the product out.
And I will, one thing that I feel like, if you feel like I'm portraying Craig Zisk in an unfair light, one of the reasons I feel like this movie was made like, hey, we need to fill 2 hours, and 30 minutes of it can be commercials, so we need a movie that's exactly 90 minutes. It was filmed in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, famous for being the place where shitty movies are.
It's where you go to film a movie that takes place in Miami, of course.
That's where you go to film Final Destination 3, but not 4. So that's...
But you bring up Craig Zisk, but I think the person who really deserves credit are the writers, because they're the people who actually had to like sit down and write this stuff out. And you have
there are 4 writers on this project.
Right. I think the most prominent one is Meredith Burrell, who is listed as one of the writers. She wrote Fridays and Seinfeld, both Michael Richards projects. Wes, I know you're a fan of Michael Richards. I know he's one of your heroes as a comedian.
No, I never was big on Seinfeld. His more recent work.
Right, his more recent, like when his stand-up shows that he does, like in comedies, like the Laugh Factory and places like that.
His viral clips and his
right,
of course.
That's what you're all about. But she's like done stuff like that. And like we also, I think she did like a couple of other like stuff for the Wonderful World of Disney. I think the question at the heart of this thing that we're getting at is like, did anyone involved in this movie actually care?
That's a great question.
I'm gonna say no.
We're gonna say no. Okay.
I want to know if we have opposing viewpoints on this. So I say that no one cared.
Here's what I will present. Did he care? I don't know. I will say I genuinely believe that Kelsey Grammer is... Now, maybe this can be the episode. Maybe this can be the argument. Is Kelsey Grammer trying? Is he miscast? Possibly. Is he trying? When he yells at Charles Durning about his terrible childhood as Santa's son, I believe he's doing it.
You know the reason... I think the reason you feel that way, Wes...
Okay.
Is because Kelsey Grammer is really good at playing Frazier.
Yeah.
He played Frazier for like a really long time.
He played Frazier for a while.
This movie came out when they were still making Frazier. So right. Kelsey Grammer is... I feel like if you're an actor working on a network sitcom, you're filming episodes like, a couple times a week for months at a time, you're going to be in Frazier mode a lot of the time. Like you're gonna have sort of that character just always kind of like locked and ready to go, just under the surface, like.
Yes, as we're both aware, Kelsey Grammer has had issues with battling a little bit of addiction, alcohol abuse. I have read interviews where directors have said, at his worst, at his lowest, the camera would turn on, he'd be Frasier, and he'd be like tone perfect, and then the camera would turn off and he'd be miserable and morose and he wouldn't be in a good place. Camera turned back on, Frasier. So I 100% believe what you're saying, where if he wants to, he can be Frasier whenever he wants.
And that works perfectly in this movie because the character is basically Frasier.
The character
you believe that he has like issues with his dad because that's Frasier. That's the Frasier talking, Wes.
I see. Like, you're saying this is a long 90-minute fanfic of what if Frasier was a Frasier Claus, which I did write in my notes.
There is 100% like outtakes where instead of calling
him Jasper, he calls him Niles.
Right, exactly. That's got to be the reason why Kelsey Grammer is the way he is in this movie, and it is miscast. I think the scene that what scene were we on? We were on the scene where he's at his Miami beach party. He's doing the conga. These people come in. This beautiful woman who is Lady Inspector Gadget.
Elaine Hendricks. That's
right.
Adam knows her as Elaine Hendricks.
I know her as Mrs. Inspector Gadget.
From Inspector Gadget 2, starring French Stewart.
Because whenever I think of an actor, I always think of them in the role that I first saw them in.
No, that's totally fair. I know her from the Lindsay Lohan Parent Trap as the mean mom who was into Dennis Quaid. You, viewer, might know her from Superstar, starring Molly Shannon and Will Ferrell.
Is she a bad guy in that too?
She is literally a bad guy in every movie
she plays like the femme fatale character pretty well.
Quick shout out to Elaine Hendricks. I did some looking into her. Apparently she's like a humanitarian and she's part of a lot of different guilds like Women in Film. So I'm sure she's a cool person, but after she got cast in Superstar, she had to be the evil woman conniving, and after two people are looking for love and she's the third wheel trying to get in for her selfish needs.
Right. And again, that's who she plays in this movie. So like everyone's cast in like roles that they're comfortable with.
I feel like the story, you just plug and play actors that have done it before. Elaine Hendricks absolutely fits in as, like, woman who is able to, like, oh, I'm so happy you're marrying me, and then, like, cut over to her making out with somebody else. Our plan is coming to fruition and all.
Right. So this is a scene where I'm just going to call him Frazier. I don't care.
Just call him Frazier.
Right. This is the scene where Frazier meets the woman, Elaine Hendricks, for the first time, her character. There's the PR guy. They're partners. Frazier's a big fancy philanthropist, and she's a newswoman, a weather girl.
He has no mentioned career. All we know is that he gives money to stuff. He lives in a mansion. He doesn't really have a job. As far as we're aware, we never see him working with anybody or negotiating. He just has an inordinate amount of money, and he's on magazines as Miami's most eligible bachelor. Elaine Hendricks is a meteorologist on this channel, and this is the point I was trying to get at when I brought up Craig Zisk, is that the movie is very efficient with its information, which because in the first 20 seconds of these people talking, Frazier goes, oh, you're this meteorologist from Channel 4, and then the guy that introduces her, Hector, is like, yeah, I made up her tagline. And then she goes, you're that philanthropist on this magazine. And then she holds up the magazine. And he's like, oh, I hated that magazine. And then they hit it off. A lot of stuff is going to come flying at you because we're doing this in 90 minutes.
Right. We're literally our characters are just speaking in exposition.
Exactly.
Because we've got to move this along.
We've got to keep it going.
So Frazier hits it off with Elaine Hendricks, Heidi, and they're dancing, and we get Jasper, who is played by Brian Bedford, who is in an episode of Frasier at some point, but I don't remember which one. He plays Jasper, who's like Frasier's elf/butler. Like, he's like an important elf character, but like he's like the personal assistant to Frasier, basically. And he is an elf. He knows all the stuff about Santa Claus.
You might know him as the voice of Robin Hood from the animated Robin Hood Disney made, where he's a fox boy. I just wanted to point that out.
All you furries out there that listen to this podcast, you know what he's from.
You can go ahead and pause it, and we'll see you in 10 minutes when you're done looking up your dark stuff on DeviantArt.
We'll be here when
when you're done with whatever you do.
Right, yeah. We're not judging.
Thanks for coming in. We appreciate it. Every view counts.
You washed your hands before you... you came in first.
Brian Bedford is the wet blanket. He's like Alfred for Batman. That's exactly what it is.
He's Alfred.
Alfred says to Frazier, you missed your meeting. And Frazier's like, I don't got to go till midnight. And then he's like, it is midnight. And he's like, oh, well, I'm dancing with Elaine Hendricks. He dances, and then time freezes, and he gets sent to the North Pole.
Wes, you need to describe the amazing CGI effect that accompanies Frazier whenever he teleports.
So Santa has the ability to poof people. He can will anyone to him and away from him, and he can will himself to and from any point. And it is accompanied by the weirdest, like, JPEG of ball ornaments and candy canes and sugar plums and stuff.
Like, just Christmas stuff.
And it happens every time anybody gets poofed, is all of a sudden there's a wave of little presents and little balls. I just watched it again. Yeah, it's like a weird wave that comes from the bottom and scatters up, and it's probably the most expensive thing in the movie. It's literally the only effect in the movie.
It's definitely the most used. So Santa Claus, the head Santa Claus, he whisks Frazier back to the North Pole to scold him for missing the rehearsal. And, Frazier's like, what's the big deal? All I gotta do is grab Mom's sack, and that's what he says.
Mom gives me the sack, gives me your sack. And it's also very symbolic, this thing, because Santa 20, or as he's known, Nicholas the 20th is literally going to pass Nicholas the 21st a torch.
Right, that's so dumb. It's
passing of the torch.
They're literally passing a torch. This is so dumb.
Look, Adam, we're 6 minutes deep. We have to pick up this.
I'm sorry.
We have to pick this up. We just got to sum up what happens now. Basically, Santa's like, you don't want the job, and Frazier's like, of course I want the job, but you're not listening to any of my ideas. I have all these cool things to make Christmas better.
His ideas basically boil down to like, we shouldn't just give presents to kids. We should give presents to everybody. His ideas to improve Christmas, quote unquote improve Christmas, they're not terrible ideas, which I think the movie wants us to think they are. And it's never really explained why the dad doesn't like the ideas, why the Santa dad.
Well, if I may take the other side of this, I think this is probably one of the better explained. Like, so Frazier's ideas are, we should replace the elf power.
But what is the elf power? What is the elf power just literally elves working for them?
I think it's basically like manpower instead of machines and factories and stuff. And Frazier's like, we're not operating at the utmost efficiency. He's like, this place is inefficient. We're way behind on technology. And Santa's like, we've been operating on elf power since the beginning. Basically, the gist of their argument is Frazier wants to expand on things which Pappy O'Daniel, Doc Hopper, Santa Claus sees as going against tradition. It is important to uphold the old ways because that is where our message was, instead of the new ways which might dilute the experience. Like when Frazier, we'll get there, but in 20 minutes, Frazier puts out a commercial where he basically wants people to donate to this website and help each other kick in money and stuff.
Right.
And Santa's like, my message was peace on earth, goodwill towards men. And Frazier's like, that's what the website is about.
We're not going to get through like every single thing that happens.
No, we're not. Clearly not.
So let's just state for the record. So the evil plan that the meteorologist lady and the PR guy have, their grand plan is to start a charity where people can donate gifts to people in need, which is a revolutionary idea. No one's thought of that.
First of all, they're trying to invent a crowdfunding website. And to be fair, GoFundMe wouldn't be invented until 2010.
Right, they're inventing GoFundMe is what they're doing.
People basically go on this website. First of all, it's a website that only works around December because it's like a Christmas website. But it's basically if Spirit Halloween, I'm sure Spirit Halloween has its own website.
Spirit Halloween doesn't have its own website. It just takes over other websites that like aren't active anymore. Right.
When JCPenney.com...
When Toys R Us went out of business.
They bought up ToysRUs.com. If you go to ToysRUs.com right now...
It just redirects to Spirit Halloween.
I am so glad you brought... First of all, I want to point out that MrSaintNick.com is a terrible name for a website. The SEO on it is horrible. There's no way to read it naturally. It's 3 different words, but one that naturally... First of all, 2 of those words naturally have a period at the end of them, Mr. and Saint, which doesn't make for a good URL. I also want to point out that I tried to type in MrSaintNick.com. Please let me know if yours goes to a different place. Mine redirects to a website called FreedomLake.com, which says, welcome to the Patriot Network, built in Texas by conservatives and veterans who follow the Constitution.
Well, see, that this is clearly the website that Kelsey Grammer would have liked to make.
Clearly, Kelsey Grammer bought the domain and had it redirect to FreedomLake.com. That's what had to happen. Before we exit, I feel like now we're organically flowing in. We're getting into the spirit of what this movie is when we talk about the antagonists and their evil plan. I want to just bit by bit, if you don't mind, go through. So at Frazier's party, Hector, who is a friend of his because he's like a big money person, introduces him to the meteorologist. They hit it off. And then Heidi, the meteorologist, is like, let's go back to Hector because he's going to tell you about this idea he has. And then Hector's like, okay, now that Heidi has told you about it, now I can tell you I want to make this 501c3 charity website where people donate, and we'll name it after you. Basically, we need you for the public face. You're like a famous philanthropist. Even though I have Heidi, who is a famous meteorologist.
Which is there? Is there any reason why he needs to be the face of the company?
Yeah, the answer is no. Let me keep going. Nick Frazier also chimes in and he's like, hey, not only can we like ask for donations and stuff, we can also try to help like connect people like a Craigslist. We can be like, hey, if you have an extra turkey, you can give it to these people who don't have enough turkey. And the guy's like, yeah, that's fine. Which isn't how you can't just tell somebody who's like built up a website for you, hey, we could also do this, and he's like, yeah, sure. Like they're gonna go, that'll take time. But either way, Hector.
Well, he knows that he doesn't really have to work because he knows that he's just going to use the money. He's just going to steal Kelsey Grammer's money.
Here's what I'm getting at: is that as we know from GoFundMe, GoFundMe is a legitimate business that makes its money off of processing fees. So if you just took like the $5 million that they end up stealing at the end of the movie, put it through processing fees, you're talking about $100,000 that will continue to grow over time, and you could just operate this business legally instead of immediately embezzling from it and framing Kelsey Grammer, which is an interesting criminal enterprise.
You would stand to make more money running the business legitimately than you would just defrauding it right out of the gate. Right.
GoFundMe made $100 million in revenue as of 4 years ago. They received donations up to $1.44 billion. The dumbest thing you could do is make it a crime immediately and try to run off to the... Okay, here's another thing. We're almost through all the weird things about their evil plan, and we haven't even talked about why Heidi... Oh my god. Okay, but... So they put the money in an offshore account in the Cayman Islands.
In Kelsey Grammer's name.
In Kelsey Grammer's name. And this
is it explained how that works?
Nick, when he's talking to Nardo, the agent, who we haven't even fucking talked about, but Frazier is like, sure, I don't have an account in the Cayman Islands, and Nardo is like, well, you have it's got your name on it, the account does, and he's like, no, my name is on the charity, which, oh no, Hector. So that makes me but then later in the jail cell, he's like, I don't know how Hector could have set up an account in my name, and then Jasper is like, Heidi. So apparently, even though they're not married, I guess, before Frazier told Heidi that he's Santa Claus, he also gave her his social security number and all of his personal information so she could set up an account in his name if she wanted to. That's the only thing that...
That's kind of a leap. You're right that that's probably the only logical way that could happen, but I don't think the people who wrote this movie thought that much about it.
No, clearly not. Which brings me back to the Cayman Islands. If you've watched enough movies, when somebody does a crime, you hear about an offshore account in the Cayman Islands or something. Now,
it's like an old Swiss bank account.
Like, oh man, this guy's dirty. He's got an account in the... I think it came up in Wolf of Wall Street. No, they had a Swiss account, I'm sorry, in Wolf of Wall Street. But the reason you transfer money to an account like the Cayman Islands or Switzerland is because accounts there have different financial secrecy laws, bank secrecy laws, where the local banks there do not have to adhere to federal governments internationally. If an international government's like, hey, I want to know how much money this guy put here, they don't have to report to it, while the United States frequently does disclose those things. The reason I tell you this is, number one, there's no reason to fly to the Cayman Islands because Cayman Islands has normal extradition laws. So if you're a criminal and you fly to the Cayman Islands, they will send you back to America to stand trial. Second of all, so the second Nardo calls his boss and is like, hey, apparently he found the most agreeable person in the Cayman Islands who was like, oh, sure, I'll adhere, even though I don't legally have to. I'll tell you all you need to know. The second Nardo was like, yeah, I talked to his bank guy. Turns out he has this much money. He transferred it all out to the Cayman Islands. The game was up. There's no escape left to be had. That's it. The movie is solved at exactly the 45-minute mark because he has all the evidence. There's nothing to even proceed forward with.
Right, no, like everything... Well, and I think that's by design because you can wrap everything up really quickly that way. Like, by having a really simple problem to solve, you can just wrap your ending up real fast.
Whenever you want to.
Whenever you want to. Like, if we're running slow or we're running fast, we can adjust. So, again, that speaks to how this movie was made. I guess since we're talking about Nardo, we should probably mention the other plot element of this movie, which has to do with illegal immigration.
Good God.
This is such a weird, like...
So
it's such like a weirdly political thing to include in your Christmas movie.
So Frazier is persnickety, and he also doesn't like being talked back to, which aren't endearing character qualities.
No, they're really, you don't like him as even if he's Santa's son. Like the giving stuff aside, the fact that he's like generous and like he donates to charities and stuff like that, he's not a very nice person. He's kind of sexist.
He doesn't take criticism. He's never wrong. Now, and as Lorena, okay, we just got to get there. We'll get to exactly what you're talking about, but please hang on to that. Put a button in it. He yells off his Indian cook. Like, he yells something like, does she have to put curry in everything? And Jasper tries to, like, let the cook down with a little bit of criticism, but clearly she's been beaten to the point she no longer wants to work for this man, and she leaves, has to be replaced. We then cut over to immigration, the federal INS building, where this woman is trying to apply for work. Her tia, Sophia, is there with her, trying to sell her to this person.
They're talking to the psychiatrist from Freddy Got Fingered.
That's delightful.
Remember the scene where it's like, he's a molester. He's a child molester. That's her. She's in that scene.
That's wonderful. So Lorena, this woman from Venezuela, has a degree in hotel management. She needs a job, otherwise she's going to get sent back. The psychiatrist from Freddy Got Fingered is like, I'm sorry, all we have is cooking jobs. You're overqualified for a lot of these. And that exact second, Nardo, this INS person, walks in and he pulls out his badge and he yells out, Immigration! Which is an obnoxious thing to yell when you're already in a federal immigration building.
Right, he's just throwing around Spanish words and like...
It would be like walking into a police station where someone is being interviewed for a crime and yelling, it's the police, open up! It's like, you're already here. Like, what are you doing? What are you talking about? This is your building. So he yells immigration and he asks for her papers and he points out that she's got a month before they expire. And she's like, yeah, I'm trying to find work before... And there's like a weird thing
He's very racist. He's very suspicious. He's convinced that she's illegal. And even though I don't think it's established whether or not she is a legal resident or not.
It is... There's definitely like a vibe where she keeps putting off like... And it makes you wonder that, but...
I don't think they actually answer it.
There are a number of things that pop up in the first act that never come up again, that feel like they'll be called back to and resolved, like the fact that Frazier doesn't like when people talk back to him, never comes up after the first 10 minutes of the film.
Right.
Nobody, not even in like a negative way where someone talks back to him and he's like, I don't like that. Like, once we get out of...
We do get that. We do get that with Lorena. So... The long and short of it is that Lorena gets hired. Jasper overhears her talking to her tia, and he offers her a job working as the new cook at Frazier's mansion. So when she gets there...
Just before that,
okay.
I just want to say, we are introduced to the fact Frazier doesn't like being talked back to. The Indian cook quits. She hates the job. And Frazier's like, hey, so you just got to fire a new cook. Jasper's like, I have to do that and all your other stuff? And Frazier's like, yes, please, go do that. You have a hard day. And then he leaves, and Jasper makes a comment under his breath. Like, he's like, hang the lights on the house. And he's like, I'll hang up your lights. And Frazier comes back, and he's like, I don't like being talked back to, Jasper. Do your stuff. And then he leaves. And then, later, Jasper hires Lorena. There's a whole scene where Frazier is coming the other way, looks for a CD, and almost
he's driving his car, and he's looking for a CD.
He's looking for a CD. He's also talking on the phone. He's being the biggest asshole. And Lorena, like, honks and yells stuff in Spanish at him. And instead of being like, oh, I probably shouldn't have started looking for a CD to put up some tunes... He's like, well, don't be so grumpy. And he decides she's the asshole because he's unable to find fault in himself. This is a consistent thing that's going to pop up over and over. Later, Jasper is showing her the house, and she is like, oh, he sounds great. And he's like, yeah, he'll be driving up soon. He's in a red Ferrari. And she's like, red Ferrari? And he's like, is that a problem? And she's like, no. But it refers to the fact that she almost got run off the road by Frazier earlier because he was looking for a CD. And then later, Frazier shows up, and she's like, it's very brief. There's a moment where she doesn't want him to know. He's like, do I know you? Are you familiar? And she's like, I don't think so.
No, all Latin women look alike.
Yes. All of us look alike. All of us. And he's like, well, okay. And then she burns her hand on the heat, and she yells out, something. She says something in Spanish, and he goes, it's you. And then he starts ranting to her about road rage. She comments back to him like, hey, you should stay in your lane. And then he says, I don't like being talked back to. Jasper should have told you that. And then he's like, she says, as Adam pointed out, in a way that points out the inherent sexism, is like, you probably like your women quiet They prefer them not talking at all.
Yeah.
And he gets so heated, and he yells at and I pointed out, I made a section in my notes called "Is it Frasier?" Most of the film, I want to point out, this is a family movie. I would say this is not a comedy, and if you're being kind, it's barely a comedy. There aren't, like, there are more like quips than jokes, and there are two moments in the film that I feel like could fit into Frasier, and one of them is like Jasper comes back in and he's like, "What's the problem?" And Frasier goes, "She drives a Volkswagen." And he goes, "Right, I'll take care of that immediately." And I thought that was Frasier-y. I thought that was one of the more Frasier-y lines.
I guess you're right that this movie, it doesn't do like jokes well, like like ha jokes. Like, the stuff that's funny is, like, the stuff that isn't intentional. When we see, like, a shot of the ground and we see, like, someone has put tape on the ground where, like, the actors are supposed to hit their mark, and we see that.
Again, normally a production team that would have shown a little bit more love might have caught that. I genuinely feel like this was like, we got to fill the time. We got the shot. Let's keep moving. What do you mean there was tape on the ground? We got the shot. Keep it going.
I think we should also talk about the fact this movie perpetuates sort of this weird white male fantasy of like the woman who's hired to like help the illegal immigrant or whatever falling in love with her Prince Charming, who's the wealthy white man she works for.
You might know, I don't know, this is the weirdest first example, but this comes up in Spanglish, starring Adam Sandler, where he's a wealthy person and she's a teacher? What is she? She's like a maid.
I haven't seen it.
Poor Mexican single mother, undocumented, takes on two jobs. She's a housekeeper and a nanny for Adam Sandler's family. There are examples of this trope, this person who is working for a white dude that is wealthy and exemplifies all these...
She's his employee.
And she will come to love him.
Despite, she will see all of his flaws, but also like what's good about him, like the good in him.
This is so important to point out. The thing between Lorena and Frasier, so they fight. This is her first day working on the job, he says like, "You cut me off in traffic," and she's like, "You're rude and sexist," and he hates her. And then a day later, he wants to propose to Heidi. First of all, Heidi and he have known each other for 2 days. He's known Lorena for 1 day. Frasier goes through this exercise. The other thing I wanted to point, the only other item in my Is It Frasier section, it feels like a very Frasier bit to have two men rehearse a romantic moment together to make sure it goes right. But I do feel like, I don't think it's Brian Bedford's fault. I think it's the writing of the script. I feel like if it were something between Kelsey Grammer and David Hyde Pierce, if it was Frasier and Niles, they would have both committed to it and like done it very genuinely, and then Martin would have come in and gone like, "What the hell are you doing?" But instead, Brian Bedford is... I think written to be like, "Sir, this is weird," and Frasier is like, "I don't know," and it doesn't feel like commitment. But that was the only other moment where I was like, I could see something like this happening in a Frasier episode.
It was definitely something that could have been done better.
But, so, Lorena's like, "Let me try," and then she sits down where Jasper is sitting. She and Frasier both go through, like, the perfect romance speech, and they chime in and help each other. And then Frasier finishes it, and she's like, "Wow." He's like, "I nailed it. Now I'll try it on Heidi later tonight." And then, like, Jasper does this bit where he's like, "Oh, that was something." And then later
I saw the way you looked at him.
"You're falling for him." And she didn't retort like, "I've known him for 36 hours. What the fuck are you talking about?"
Well, not only you point out that moment, and that is an important moment that does get some payoff. I think the other thing that was supposed to have endeared him to her was the scene where immigration like busts into Frasier's kitchen and like starts threatening to arrest everybody, and Frasier's like, "These people aren't illegal, you get out of here." And she was like, he stood up for us. And it's like, of course he did. You're his employees. He doesn't if you get arrested, he has to find new employees and he could get in trouble. This shouldn't endear you to him.
Not only that, but like Nardo was like, "You're getting a fine," and he's like, "No, I'm not." And it's not out of the goodness of his heart necessarily. It's more about his own neck. And the more kind thing might be, he's like, "Hey, come out and drink with us, everybody. That was shitty. Come spend time with us out here on the patio." But it does set up Nardo deciding to... We do follow Nardo. Nardo has like his own arc, which is he gets into this tough with Lorena at immigration and then follows her getting his hair cut by a barber on a porch. And then he decides to raid Frasier's home, possibly, I guess, with a warrant. I don't know.
If he had a warrant, I feel like he should have, he went in there and left immediately.
He left in very quick. He did not search anybody. So he left. He decided to investigate Frazier, and that's how he discovered the website embezzlement and fraud, and decided, based on the fact that the account was in Frazier's name, has to be Frazier. Didn't decide to freeze the money, which is why Hector was able to pull it out and try to fly to the Cayman Islands. Stupid thing that happens in the movie. I feel like first of all, the fact that immigration is going after financial crimes doesn't make a lot of sense. It's never established, but we never go over Frazier's, nationality if he's a citizen of the North Pole, because then it would make sense for immigration to be on top of him, because they'd be like, well, he's not a citizen, we have to keep track of these things. But instead, for some reason, we just know immigration
doesn't care where white man Kelsey Grammer is from.
Which, yeah, that's another thing I wrote down. We don't have to talk extensively about it, but Kelsey Grammer is white. There's not a world where they just spring arrest on him. He's not Wesley Snipes. Wesley Snipes was arrested for tax evasion, even though he was like, oh shoot, my tax guy messed it up. I'm sorry, I'll pay whatever I need to. And they were like, no, you're going to prison. It's a different... Kelsey Grammer wouldn't be done because he's white.
He gets caught and he gets put in the drunk tank at the county jail.
And here's the thing, I will point out, the movie does have a joke. But it has a joke that it's very proud of, and I can tell it's proud of it because it does the same joke twice, back to back, where there's a prisoner, oh hey, you're Santa Claus, and he goes, yeah, from the TV, from the commercial. We haven't even talked about the commercial yet. Frazier is talking to this guy. He gets very personal with Frazier, and Jasper walks up and he's like, sir, you're in here. And Frazier's like, oh yeah, I'm in jail. And then the prisoner walks up and is like, Heidi set him up. He told me all about it. And then they talk more, and Jasper's like, I want to tell you something personal. And Frazier's like, can you give us a moment? And he goes, yeah, okay. And then he walks away. And then they do the same exact bit when Lorena walks up, and it's like, Frazier, it's you. And Lorena, and then the guy walks up, and he's like, Heidi, set him up. And then Frazier's like, could you give us a moment? And he goes, yeah, sure. And then it's the exact same. They are very excited at this joke where somebody gets way too personally involved in Frazier and then leaves immediately.
I think probably the one joke that made me laugh.
There is one item in my section called Jokes I Liked as Presented. And I think, go ahead, but I'm sure it's the same joke.
So Frazier is filming a commercial for
yes.
MrSaintNick.com. He's doing it as Santa. He's surrounded by all these children. And the director yells cut, and they're like, oh, we got to fix this. Frazier's too sweaty. Oh, let's lose the kid in the wheelchair. And
No, this taps into a very specific part of my brain. I love jokes where it's like, that's not cool to say. So he didn't say, let's lose the kid in the wheelchair. He says, let's lose the cripple. Let's lose the cripple.
You're
kid.
right.
And I was like, oh, that doesn't... You can't say that. You can't even say that in 2002.
No, you can say it in 2002.
The assistant walks up and he's like, good job, you got to get out of here. And the kid just stands up out of the wheelchair and walks away. The joke is perfect as presented, and then they do a thing that kind of spikes...
right, where Kelsey Grammer's like, hey, that kid can walk.
And it's like, yes, that's the joke, Frazier. Let's fucking keep it going. Just leave the moment. It was funny. Why do you have to fucking stay in it? Stupid.
I think we've said about as much as we can say about Lorena for now. We should probably talk about the other aspect of the evil plan, which is to get the Heidi woman to marry Frazier. You say you think that was part of the plan because that was the only way she could have stolen his identity to set up the Cayman Islands account.
But here's the problem with that theory is she never marries Frazier, so she can't act.
Right, they get engaged. There's a planned marriage, and the whole thing is the flip side of this is that Frazier is trying to get married because he needs a Mrs. Claus.
He needs a Mrs. Claus, as seen in Santa Claus 2, the Mrs. Claus. And the Pappy O'Daniel Santa Claus says, when I was supposed to be, by Halloween, I was there with my beard and my wife, my Mrs. Claus, I was ready to go. You don't even have a watch, so we don't even know if you're going to show up on time. Frazier needs to have at least a lady ready for him to be the Santa Claus.
Why does Kelsey Grammer's character care about finding a wife when he doesn't want to take over over his dad's Christmas.
If we understand the motivation of the character correctly, he says he wants to inherit it, but he's not willing to admit he's afraid of fucking up. Jasper is constantly needling him like, oh, you're gonna do a great job. And he's like, what do you mean? Like, I'm not afraid I won't do a bad job. I'm not afraid of inheriting my dad. And then he wants the job, and then Jasper is like...
Isn't the entire point... I'm sorry, Wes, but wasn't the entire point of him starting his charity, getting on board with the Mr. St. Nick idea, is because that's like, that could be his. That's what he'll do, and his dad will go on doing Christmas his way.
Well, we don't state that explicitly. Maybe you're right, but I do feel like if that is the plan, we don't bring it up, and it never comes up as an option, because obviously by the end of the film, Kelsey Grammer takes over normal Christmas, and normal Christmas goes on, and we don't know if the website will continue. The thing that we are covering is that Frazier Claus. No, Jasper. Okay, we've got to go back. Jasper tries to bring him breakfast in bed, and Frazier's like, "You're not chatty." And Jasper's like, "I wish you wouldn't be shitty to your dad like that. He's like a legend." And he's like, "Well, he whenever I try to bring up ideas, he won't listen." And Jasper points out, "Well, why can't you just wait until he hands it off to you? And then you're in charge and you can make whatever changes you want. Like, you're getting into fights just to get into fights with him." So he seems like he wants to inherit the job, but he's also, from what I understand, and I guess we're arguing over different interpretations of the film, but from my understanding, Frazier is mostly doing this website to expand on Christmas in a way that he hopes will impress his dad, because his dad doesn't want to hand off Christmas. And I don't even know if we've brought that up before now, an hour into the podcast, but Pappy O'Daniel hates the idea of giving Frazier Christmas, and is like he has like a little pep in his step when they fight, and he's like, I guess I'll do this for another 100 years, because he doesn't want to hand it off, because he feels like, he thinks Frazier is going to fuck up Christmas. Well, but then he starts losing his powers.
Right. So we get into the whole Frazier becoming Santa Claus, because even though him and his father aren't speaking, and I guess they're just resolved to do their own thing, Frazier starts gaining Santa Claus's powers. I find it so baffling that none of the characters could figure out what was going on. Like, it's this big, it's treated like a mystery. Oh, why can't Santa Claus make toys or know which child is naughty or nice? It's because the powers are leaving him and they're being transferred to Kelsey Grammer's character. And it's right. Like, why do these characters not know how their own powers work? Why do we need Wallace Shawn to come in, take out a bunch of D&D dice out of a pouch? Right. And give us analogies about fish and explain it that way. Jesus Christ, have we talked about that scene yet? No, we haven't.
I do have that scene in a section in my notes called Most Pointless Scene. There are movies that have, like, a magical character, and he will give answers, but in a very riddle, like, he'll present it in an analogy, and then the characters, like, the story will go on, and the characters will be trying to interpret, they might misinterpret, and by the end, they'll put the pieces together, but it gives some direction to propel the story forward, and that purpose in a sort of mystical riddle message is entirely defeated when the guy does it, says the message, and the character goes, "Can you explain what you just said?" And he goes, "Sure, I'll tell you what it means." Like, that was just a way to kill another 4 minutes in the story. If you just wanted Wallace Shawn to say, "Hey, you've got to hand the powers off," you could have done that instead of this bullshit haddock halibut joke thing.
Oh, and we haven't even mentioned yet his wife, the Mrs. Claus, Kelsey Grammer's mom. It's the mom from Brazil. You know, the one, yes. You're the one who's getting, like, her face pulled back? It's
Catherine Hellman.
Right.
She's also... Go ahead.
She plays Mrs. Claus. The Mrs. Claus to Doc Hopper's Santa Claus. So she calls Wallace Shawn up because she notices all these weird things going on with Santa Claus not being like Santa Claus. And she's like, "Wallace Shawn, can you tell us what's going on?" And Wallace Shawn is like, "I've got to send Quark to the Gamma Quadrant."
All right.
No, he comes in and he takes out his pouch and he throws his D&D dice and he makes up some crap about fishes. Like, he's like, "Oh, you're the head of the trout," or something. It's such a weird scene. But right. Basically, he tells them, yes, this is how your Santa powers work. There are forces more powerful than, your dad. So Kelsey Grammer's become Santa Claus no matter what. And they don't mention what these greater powers are. Like, what elder gods, like, do they worship and are controlling these powers?
The whole bit where Nick, after having his fight with the suit, stuffing the pieces of clothing in the closet, and then yelling, like, real funny, Dad. And then Jasper goes, no, this is beyond your dad. These are forces bigger than Christmas itself, and we never explain what that line means, and we never go.
Right, that's he's like Jasper, you're scared. You sound scared, and everyone is very surprised by the fact, including Kelsey Grammer, who has no reason to be surprised that he's becoming Santa Claus. He's surprised that he's Santa Claus. So, like, evil people, they try and skip town because they've stolen all the money from the charity, and Kelsey Grammer is getting the blame for it, so he gets thrown in jail. Meanwhile, Jasper, who's found out about the whole him becoming Santa Claus thing, goes to the jail and tells him, you're Santa Claus. And Frasier's like, it's like he doesn't believe it. Which, like, what reason does he have not to believe it?
Right, he knows he's Santa's son. He knows he's going to get the powers. We covered it. In an X number of days, he'll be inheriting becoming Santa. Why would he doubt that he'd start getting Santa powers?
And on that subject, Santa's powers. Let's go over Santa's powers, Wes. Let's see if we can list all of Santa's powers in this movie. Santa has the power to summon people and teleport himself to wherever he wishes.
He can fix any toy. We covered that. We never see Frazier fix a toy, but one of the things that proves Pappy O'Daniel is losing his powers is he can't fix a toy. He's working on a plane and then he drops it and he can't fix it. He also has an encyclopedic knowledge of all children on whether they're naughty or nice. He can read children's minds.
Right, that's the really weird one. The reason Santa Claus knows what kids want for Christmas, it's not because, like, kids write him, like, letters saying what they want for Christmas. It's because he can read their minds.
He's a lot like Professor Xavier, but just for children, just for kids.
which is such a weird choice for you to make movie.
There's a deleted scene where we see Pappy O'Daniel Santa Claus, like, drop into the basement of the North Pole, and he has a Cerebro there.
Okay, so what other powers? He has the power to make sandcastles really well.
And he also can make, like, a little model sleigh that'll fly in a circle and back to the sand.
Right, he can turn like a little model into, like, an actual sleigh that flies around magically.
I don't know if this is a power, but the Aurora Borealis follows him.
Right, that's we mentioned that. So yeah, the Aurora Borealis, whoever is Santa Claus, the Aurora Borealis follows that person. That's why you see the Aurora Borealis in the North Pole, is because that's where Santa is. But because Kelsey Grammer is becoming Santa and lives in Miami Beach, suddenly we've got the Northern Lights in Miami Beach, which no one seems freaked out by. No one seems to question that.
And the only other powers... correct me if I'm wrong, Adam.
He can make cars fly.
I was going to get there. He can make it snow in Miami. He can make it snow wherever he
controls the weather, Wes.
He can make his own car fly. Well, we don't know if he controls all weather.
Why wouldn't he be able to control all weather if he can make it snow?
Well, can you make it lightning if you make it snow, Adam? Check.
I think so. I think this Santa is, like, way more powerful than we're giving him credit for, which is...
Whatever car he's driving, or conceivably, we don't see him do it, but we would assume he can make any other car fly.
This isn't really a power, but, like, if he has to laugh, he will go ho 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 involuntarily.
That is thank you for bringing that up, Adam. We forgot about that. But when he's delighted by something, he will start laughing ho ho ho.
One of the best moments in this movie is Kelsey Grammer doing his ho ho ho, which is terrible. He is really bad at sounding like Santa Claus. His ho 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 is terrifying. And I feel like I need to find a freeze frame of that one scene when they're on the beach, like right after he's proposed to Heidi. He's laughing and he's doing the ho ho thing. It's like I feel like I think I know what Kelsey Grammer's O face looks like now, because after watching that scene, because it's just, there's this look on his face which is just disturbing. We don't even need to find that Kelsey Grammer porno film anymore. No,
because we have the spirit of it.
Right. We know what his O face looks like. Oh God.
We're almost to. We've found a way to talk all the way around where I feel like I'm comfortable with the last thing, But there is I feel like there's a scene we omitted. I feel like we can basically cut the child band because the child band virtually.
Oh, you mean the child band who is actually really playing music, Wes?
Oh yeah, that child band. That they definitely had a live performance.
It definitely was them playing that music and not them just playing like the sounds of a professional band over that music in post.
It was definitely not that, Adam. I can't impress on that enough. It was for sure them playing. And I don't know why you're bringing it up, since that's what happened.
Well, I'm just saying because the people haven't watched it. They're the people listening, presumably, they're definitely playing those instruments.
They are for sure playing those. There's not a world where they aren't playing those things.
Right.
There's a scene that we talk our way around. Okay, and I guess we should also contrast it with the scene later, because I feel like the film is designed to contrast these two scenes. When Frazier is engaged to Heidi, he comes to her job. And he says, hey, I need to tell you something. Since you're going to meet my family, it's going to come up, and I can't keep the secret from you any longer. I'm the heir apparent. I'm Santa Claus's heir. And she's like, what? And it is legitimately I think it's the only good edit in the film, but she's wearing the same outfit, and she's reacting to it, and she looks like she's in the same spot, and it cuts back, and now she's talking to Hector, talking about how crazy Frazier is. One quick shout out to a good edit. So she is yelling like, I can't marry him. He's Santa Claus. And he's like... He thinks he's
Santa Claus.
And he's like, yeah, whatever. And the thing, the thing that gets me is like, wait, hold on, Heidi. You're doing this to keep the scam going, and then you and Hector are going to disappear. Like, are you really going to marry Frazier? I don't understand.
Wait, that's what you noticed?
But then Hector provides a solution that makes less sense, where he's like, I mean, if he is crazy... then we can have him declared mentally inept, and then you get all his money. And if he isn't crazy and he is Santa, you're going to get all this money from being the wife of Santa Claus. And then she thinks about it and goes like, oh yeah. And it's like, I'm sorry, do you fucking people know what your plan is? What the fuck are you doing?
And no, that's exactly what I was going to say. Like, he's willing to, like, entertain the idea, like, oh, maybe if he's not crazy, then it means you're married to Santa Claus, and we get in on some of that Christmas action, which it's like...
He literally calls it that Christmas action.
Yeah. Right, it's like, why are people in this world so believing that there is a Santa Claus?
I mean, it's not really clear because, like, the kid, Lorena's nephew, doesn't believe in Santa Claus. Frazier's like, you ready for Santa? And then he thinks, yeah, right. But apparently these people that are criminals do believe in Santa and are ready to capitalize on one of them getting married into the Santa family so they can then embezzle from inside the North Pole, I guess.
And yes, and I'm glad you brought that up because that is just a bizarre moment. And of course, Frazier eventually does figure out what the plan is. He realizes that he's been betrayed by his two best friends and that he's got to make this right and he's got to take over the family. He's got to assume his rightful place as Santa Claus. So right. He breaks out of jail.
It's very similar. Adam, I don't know if you've ever seen The Lion King, but the part where Nala approaches Simba and it's like, you're the son of the great king. It's a lot like that. I think a lot of the dialogue was lifted directly from Lion King, including the bit where Frazier looks up in the sky and he sees Pappy O'Daniel's face.
No, but I want to talk about the scene where he breaks out of jail, because in that scene, he goes from, like, not believing he's Santa to believing that he's Santa, despite not really having any real reason not to believe that he's Santa, because he's the son of Santa. And
right before he escapes, please, I'm sorry, this is the perfect time to bring it up, and I want to contrast it to the earlier scene we just mentioned where Heidi doesn't think he's Santa. He decides this is the perfect time while he's in jail to tell Lorena he's Santa.
Because she's visiting him in jail. She thinks that he's guilty, by the way.
Like, everybody else around her Tia Sophia and her nephew are both like, he didn't do it. And she's like, yeah. And there is one thing I put down, and it, again, the only joke that I really like is the wheelchair kid joke. There is one joke that I put as like a distant second, and Tia Sophia's going like, don't believe it, he's innocent until proven guilty. This is the holidays, peace on earth, goodwill towards men. And then Lorena says, I hate men. And I thought that was funny. And then she says, Daniel is like, I don't believe it. And then she goes, yeah, he's a criminal. Like, no, I mean, I don't believe Frazier's a criminal. He's a very nice guy. He did all these cool things for us. There's no way an embezzler would do nice things.
He bought us instruments that were really playing.
Yeah, for sure. There's no way he's a criminal. So for some reason, that kind of convinces her enough to go to the jail and visit Frazier, who tells her it was Heidi that framed him, and then she doesn't like Heidi. Nobody likes Heidi. We didn't cover it. Nobody likes Heidi. And they're making shitty comments about that she's not wearing enough clothing. Both Mrs. Claus and Lorena are like a little bit slut-shamey into how Heidi dresses. We don't really talk about the fact that Heidi's not a nice person. It's exclusively that she doesn't dress nice is why people don't like her.
Anyway. Did you notice the scene? So there's the scene where they're preparing for the wedding, and I guess they're timing how quickly she walks down like the aisle. And as she's doing it, Lorena is singing like the wedding, like dum dum da dum, but she's calling her dumb.
She's calling her a dum dum, and that's funny. That's clever. Yeah, it's fun. Yes, I did catch that out.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And that was the same scene where we saw the tape on the ground.
Right, right.
So he tells Frey, it was Heidi, and Lorena goes, I never liked that woman. And the guy walks up and they do the bit again where it's like, hey, could we have a second? I feel like that's important to let you, the viewer, know so you have that in context. So Frazier says, I'm Santa Claus. And she goes,
I believe you.
Claus. Yeah, well, she goes Santa Claus, and he goes, yes. And then she goes, okay. And then he goes, you believe me? And I feel like a better line would be like, I mean, that doesn't really matter right now. You're in jail. We'll figure out how to help you. I think you're a decent person and you were framed. Whether or not you're Santa, we'll figure that out. But instead she's like, well, you're a very generous man. So, yeah, absolutely, you're Santa Claus.
And then we find out. I think I know where you're going with this. So she's like, okay, great. You believe me. Lorena believes in me. I believe in me, so I've got to go save my dad, and I've got to break out of jail. So he uses the crappy CGI effect to teleport himself out of jail. And it's at that moment where Lorena is like, oh my god, he actually is Santa Claus. It's like, you just said you believed him. You're telling us that was just, you were just lying. You were just placating him.
I mean, that makes more sense than her actually thinking he's Santa Claus. So
I guess, but then we cut to outside where Kelsey Grammer is. He's teleported himself just outside into some bushes outside of the jail.
And Jasper says something that sounds super added in later, dialogue added in post. He says something that sounds like he's saying it from 3 miles away in a studio booth. He says I guess he's still figuring out his locationing. And it's like, all right, fucking whatever. Yeah, he transfers himself out of the police station into this bush. And
then he's like, oh, I guess I really am Santa Claus. It's like, if you didn't think you were Santa Claus, why did you just do all that? Why do the people who have no reason to believe him that he's Santa Claus instantly believe that he's Santa Claus, including the bad guys, and the people who have every reason to believe he's Santa Claus, including himself, doesn't believe it?
We're so close to the end. So, as they're standing in this bush, they get to the car, and that is when Nardo yells, prisoner escape, prisoner escape! And he tries to get the police to all get in this chase with Kelsey Grammer. Now, there is a common rule about car chases. I don't know how many episodes of Murder, She Wrote you've watched, Adam.
None.
None? Okay, sorry. The real person that wrote the Murder, She Wrote, that was played by Angela Lansbury in the show, has a couple rules into how she writes a murder mystery. And the rules, I think there are 3 of them, but the 2 I remember most distinctively are no gunfights and no car chases. Basically, everything should be moving the plot forward. A car chase basically is just a way to stretch out time. Ideally, whatever is at the end of the car chase is finding another clue or figuring out who the driver is. If you can do it without the car chase, don't bother doing the car chase. That's just a way to extend fake tension. And the same thing with a gunfight. One of them is going to shoot the other. You don't need a gunfight. The thing I was approaching with the scene with the car chase is, does the car chase provide any character-oriented stuff that would not be achievable without the car chase? And I could argue that the car chase is necessary because without it, Frazier doesn't figure out he can make cars fly. But that introduces the point, why can Frazier make any car fly? I want to point out that I wrote in my note, because we don't get to talk about car chases on the Frazier on Frazier episodes because we haven't had a car chase yet in Frazier. The closest thing we've had is when bulldog gets beaten, and that was traffic, which is the opposite of a car chase. So when this car chase came up, I was like, oh, cool, there's a way to apply the Murder, She Wrote test to a car chase scene. And then he flew away, and that presented further questions that kind of omitted the whole possible discussion about a car chase scene.
You're right. That whole car chase thing is pointless. I'm going through my notes and figuring out like what I haven't talked about yet. There's an erectile dysfunction joke. Mr. and Mrs. Claus, he's lost all his powers because they're all in Kelsey Grammer now. So instead of being able to... I'm explaining it, Wes. He doesn't have his powers anymore. So he can't summon Kelsey Grammer to the North Pole to tell him that he's losing his powers. Instead, they've got to fly Delta, and they've got to go to him. But before that, they try and take the sleigh and the reindeer because, Santa Claus. So Santa Claus is out in his sleigh, he's doing, on Dancer, on Prancer, all that stuff. They won't fly because we've got a limited budget in this movie. Mm-hmm. So he actually says, oh, I can't get it up. And the wife's like, oh, don't worry, dear, it happens to all men sometimes.
And then that's that erectile dysfunction joke.
In our Christmas movie.
For a family film, I don't think there's a single...
He has sex with Heidi. Frazier, his character, has sex with Heidi. They show her, like, the morning after. It's real weird. I don't want to think of Santa Claus as, like, a sexual being, Wes.
But clearly he is, because first of all, he has erectile dysfunction. Second of all, he's sunflowers. If we're just bringing up notes, this is the only item in a section I wrote called Jokes I Liked and Can't Explain Why or What the Joke Is, but I like it, I like the sound of it, is in the bit where Pappy O'Daniel summons Frazier to yell at him because they saw the commercial, and he yells, MrSaintNick.com, what's next, Hanukkah in a can? And
which I kind of wonder, in a world where Santa Claus is real... How do people of other religions feel about that?
I honestly, that's a fair question. All I could think about was what Hanukkah in a can is as a product. And that kept me I had to pause the film as I pondered it and I thought about it and I smiled a lot. I don't know if I ever laughed, but I thought the line was stupid enough that the more I thought about it, the more I thought it was fun.
I just think it's weird when you introduce other religions into a movie where Santa Claus is real, because it raises a whole bunch of weird questions. Like, if Santa Claus is real, does that mean like Christianity is the correct religion in that world?
Yes, absolutely.
It's
unconditional.
Which is so... You remember Rise of the Guardians?
Of course.
I wrote so much fan fiction for Rise of the Guardians when I was a kid. So in that movie, you have a Santa Claus. And you have all of the other, the Sandman and the Easter Bunny and stuff like that. But you don't have anything that conflicts with Santa Claus. You don't have, like, a Hanukkah personality or a Kwanzaa personality or anything like that, which is kind of weird. This movie is so bizarre.
But on the subject, I'm sorry, I was thinking about it. I was like, what is this making me think of? There is an offhand joke that I put in my section called Jokes I Liked for the Implication on the Lore of This Universe. And when Pappy O'Daniel is like, I could do this job for another 100 years, Mrs. Claus says, I was so looking forward to retiring, and then we see her holding a brochure for Valhalla! Which is the afterlife for people who die in combat if you're a Viking. That's fascinating.
So in this...
I get when you're Santa, I want you to contribute so badly, but I just want to say my thought here is if you're Santa, you get to choose your own afterlife from any bevy of religions, because they have all these brochures, and they're really thinking about the Viking afterlife, where you get to eat, drink, and fight 100% of the time.
This movie...
This movie
raises so many bizarre questions for no reason, other than I think it just thinks it's being funny, but it's just baffling. Let's wrap up. Frazier becomes Santa Claus. He marries the housekeeper. Christmas is saved. The bad guys get arrested. The dinner party that Frazier and Niles planned is ruined. It's like it ends exactly the way you're expecting it to.
Right. It's a Christmas movie. The bad guys try to get on a plane. Frasier teleports.
Oh, that's his other power. That's his other power, is to tie people up.
Tie up criminals with bow and wrapping and leave a note that says open in 10 to 20. Haha.
Even when he's not there, he doesn't have to do it in person. He can do it remotely.
But Frasier and his dad have been stubborn and don't want to see each other. The dad's like, he should come to me, and Frasier's like, I don't want to talk to him. But now Frasier has the power to go see his dad. His mom convinces everybody, now that he's okay with meeting his dad, he's like, okay, I'll go see my... So he says, take me to my dad. His dad is conveniently at the airport having flown Delta because he couldn't take the sleigh. And he runs into Heidi, and he's like, oh, hey, you're my son. You know my son. You were in that commercial. And she goes, who are you? He's like, I'm Nick's dad. And then Frasier pops up. He tells Heidi what the true spirit of Christmas is. And it's the most missed callback. All he has to do is say the exact same thing Pappy O'Daniel said in the first 5 minutes. But I've watched the scene back and forth like 3 times, and it's not exactly the same thing. And I'm like, why wouldn't you just have him say the same line? It's an easy layup for a callback.
I don't even remember what he says, though. Because
Pappy O'Daniel says, like, oh, I couldn't have said it better. And that would have made it a joke if he had said the same thing. But he didn't. It was just a different thing. That was also about family and opening your heart and bullshit.
Right. Yeah, I don't even remember what he said because it was all just the most generic, like, oh, Christmas is about giving and family, and that's what's really important, not your website.
That's what it is, Charlie Brown. It's about 3 men in the desert, and they find a baby in a manger, and Herod is like, I kill them all, and the wise men are like, don't kill it, we'll give it myrrh. And then Mary goes, what's myrrh? And then they're like, it's like a perfume. And she's like, oh. And they're like, you can spray it on the baby. And as Frasier is explaining this, Heidi is just like edging closer and closer to the plane. Sorry, I got trapped in thinking about Frasier going on too long about Christmas. Heidi gets on the plane, and Hector's like, what took you so long? She says something cute, like, I have to meet the parents. Instead of being like, hey, so the guy we set up is out of jail. Should that concern us at all? Like, is there a chance this could come back to us? The point I'm trying to get at is Frasier zaps he and his dad back to his home so that they can pass the torch and do the whole ceremony thing. Nardo does this big dive, and he's like, drop the weapon with the torch. And then they hand the torch off. He gets the Santa powers. He teleports Nardo onto the plane where he has tied up Heidi and Hector with a little cute label that says open in 10 to 20 years. The reason I brought all that up is I want to say, isn't that like that bit in the Venture Brothers where Captain Sunshine throws the Monarch in the jail? And he's like, somehow this guy got out, and then they just let him go because that's not how criminal justice
apparently works. No one told him about due process.
Like, there is clear evidence, because I don't think... we see very briefly Hector using a paper shredder to shred all the documents, which I think not having those documents is as much a crime as destroying those documents. Like, if they're like, hey, did you keep records for your 501c3? And they're like, no, we didn't. That is also a crime. That doesn't get you out of criminal proceedings for charity fraud. But the point is, there's a chance that Nardo would just walk up and be like, oh, somebody tied these people up. And then he unties the bow and he's like, enjoy your flight. And then he gets off the plane. First of all, we're given no evidence Nardo is actually good at his job at investigating stuff, because despite all this evidence and calling the Cayman Islands, he thinks it was Frazier, just because Frazier's name was on the account, because he's biased against immigrants, because Frazier hires immigrants. I mean, he might dislike Hector, but that's a weird, dark implication that he would pin it on Hector just because Hector is tied up on a plane and has a label that says 10 to 20. He's like, sure, this is how I think crimes work. You're both going to jail. You for sitting next to a Hispanic man, and you for being a Hispanic man. As you were saying, Frasier puts on a fake beard. Lorraine, they go out. They're going to do Christmas together. They're going to all be on the sleigh, which is something that Frasier changes because he pointed out earlier that he just wanted to sit on his dad's lap and fly the sleigh with him and do Christmas with him. But his dad was never about it. He's going to do Christmas with his wife and their nephew, who was totally playing music earlier. Lorena makes a comment that is like, I don't know how I feel about the beard. And Frasier's like, don't worry, it's fake. And he pulls off his mustache. Just did it to make my dad happy. He says something like, I love you, Lorena. And she says, I love you,
Frasier.
St. Nicholas. I love you. I
love you, Frasier Claus.
She says something along the lines of, I love you, Mr. St. Nicholas. And then he says, call me Santa. And I feel like it's the biggest missed opportunity for her to be like, No, I'm not ready. I'm not there yet. I'm not quite there yet. I'm not 100% there yet. Let's deliver a couple toys. That I never wanted to call a sexual partner Santa, and now here we are. I'm in it. I'm deep in it. I'm scanning my notes document. There's only one other thing I wanted to bring up, and it is a thing that I put under a section called Jokes I Liked for the Wrong Reason. One thing was I like the bit where Nardo is talking to his boss on the phone, and he takes off his sunglasses for dramatic effect, but he's talking to somebody on the phone. So there's no way he would know that he took off his sunglasses for dramatic effect. I wish I could give the movie writers credit for like, oh, look at this nerdy too. But I think that was supposed to be genuine. And I liked the bit where they had somebody in a pilot voice go, I'm sorry, we're going to be delayed a little while on this plane because for the first time in Miami, there's a snowstorm. This has never happened before. This
is a miracle of nature. It could be a sign of the end times, but
evidence of climate change. Al Gore warned us about this. Why didn't we listen? Oh, God. We will be delayed 45 minutes to the end of time, possibly, if Revelation is to be believed. You can look under your chair where you can find a Bible, and you can convert at this point.
So the show ends. The movie, the whatever. Kelsey Grammer is Santa. All is right with the world. I guess the moral, I guess the thing we're supposed to take away from this is that if you're going to defraud a charity, you better hope your dad is the president. That's the moral, I guess.
I mean, the police don't stop storming the mansion.
Right.
They absolutely just miss him, so presumably Frazier Claus is still a wanted man. He just won't ever be caught because now he lives at the North Pole. Very similar to like Roman Polanski or Woody Allen. Like the North Pole just doesn't have extradition laws, which the Cayman Islands do. So they just flew to the wrong place, did Heidi and Hector, and could have... Anyway, Adam, we're almost done, but I do want to say, because your mission, before we started recording, was you said we needed to answer who, what, when, where, and why. I feel like we answered who directed it, who starred in it. We talked about where it was fictionally Miami, shot in Vancouver. I think we talked... We just said it in its own time. This was shot in 2002. Put it in context with Santa Claus, which was shot 8 years before. This came out the same year as Santa Claus 2. And we also covered what, because this is a movie, and you can watch it for free on Tubi if you want.
With advertisements.
Did, Adam, as I have to ask, do you feel comfortable that we answered why? And if we didn't, can you now answer why?
The reason why this movie was made was because Disney needed something to show on television to fill airtime and sell ad space. There isn't a larger reason. This wasn't a passion project. No one dreamed of making this movie. I will bet money on that.
It does feel like somebody had like a checkbox for like what goes in a Christmas movie, and you completely eliminate the human element. Like if a robot randomly generated a Christmas movie, this is what would come out.
Right. It's strange like that, and that's maybe its appeal. I don't know if I could really recommend this to anybody unless you're just you just enjoy watching bad Kelsey Grammer stuff. So unless you're like a real big Frasier fan, I don't know of anybody else who would really benefit from watching this. It is Kelsey Grammer playing Frasier. It's the same, I know we said it before, but it's pretty much the same character, which makes me excited for the next Christmas movie we're going to review. Assuming we do this next year, we're probably going to talk about the Kelsey Grammer Christmas Carol movie that he's in.
2004, 2 years later.
Where he plays Ebenezer Scrooge, who is an established character in, literature and has, very defined traits. It'll be interesting to see how Kelsey Grammer, who in this movie is playing the same character he plays in the sitcom that he's famous for, plays Ebenezer Scrooge.
A Christmas Carol, the 2004 TV film, was premiered on the NBC network, not the ABC network, but was also made by Hallmark Entertainment.
And it's a musical, isn't it? Is that right?
It is A Christmas Carol, the musical.
It's got one of the guys from Rent, which I know is your favorite musical of all time.
Oh, Jesse L. Martin, who was on Law and Order, probably more famous for being in Rent, which is
your favorite. I've heard you talk extensively about how much you love Rent.
Is it weird that I'm more like I react more harshly when you said Rent is my favorite musical than when you said Michael Richards is my favorite comedian. I was like, sure, I'll go with
it's
this
more
one.
offensive to you.
It irks me more. When you said like Michael Richards is my favorite, I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll yes and to this bit. And then when you were like, Rent is your favorite, I was like,
Wes hates the movie Rent for reasons that I'm sure we'll get into when we talk about.
Oh, we'll definitely discuss it. But any closing thoughts on Mr. Saint Nick? Anything to put a button on it?
I mean, you could do worse in terms of like made-for-TV Christmas movies. This movie is, I feel like it's very much a product of its time, aping off the success of a film franchise that didn't have a very long lifespan beyond like the 2000s, and because of that, it's even. It's a shadow of what, you know, the Santa Claus movies are. And it's just fascinating because of the similarities and the differences and just the stuff that is different, how poorly it's done. This is basically if the Santa Claus didn't have a budget. Kelsey Grammer is horribly miscast in this. I think it would have worked better if the character of St. Nicholas Jr. or whatever his name is, it was younger. I think if you get a younger person to play him, I think this movie would be a little more bearable to watch. As it stands, it comes off as weird and creepy when we have Kelsey Grammer falling in love with his housekeeper.
I don't think at the time it was a great trope, and it has only aged worse.
Right. That's maybe something they could have done differently. But I don't think that alone would have been enough to really save this. So that's my opinion. If you're like not super into Frasier or Kelsey Grammer, then you have no reason to watch this. But if you do, I mean, maybe pop it in. I mean, we got some enjoyment out of it, just making fun of it and watching it.
Sure, it was good to make fun of, and it had one good joke, and the other joke, Hanukkah in a can, I made myself like. So that's something. That's 1.5 to 1 3/4 jokes.
Right. So we're going to. I guess we're going to go ahead and call this the end of the episode. Thank you so much for listening. We're going to start posting regular episodes. I think probably the week after New Year's. So
yep, season 2, we're kicking it off right. We wanted to give you this gift to celebrate Jimmy Buffett's birthday. He died for your sins.
Right.
Now,
so
yeah.
So tonight, before you go to bed, pray to Jimmy Buffett, and we hope you'll listen to the new season of Frasier on Frasier when it premieres next year. Again, I don't even think we introduced ourselves at the beginning of this, but for the record, I am Adam Frazier. I'm the host. I've been your host. Wes Corwin, the co-host, Mr. Comedian Extraordinaire, Mr. Saint Nick.
That's what they call me.
So, yeah, we want to thank you for listening, and we hope you have a good night. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and stay safe out there. The Frasier on Frasier podcast wishes to thank KACL780.net for providing episode transcripts and Ronald O'Connell for providing our theme song, Frasier MIDI.